Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Caught Listening. Thanks for listening to the following podcast on Public House Media.
You're listening to Catch Up, an official news production of Public House Media.
Today is June 19th, 2020, and it's time to catch up on the news you need to know about.
Today we're helping you catch up on John Bolton's new book, the latest updates on DACA, a major football announcement, and more. We're your hosts, Dan Kotnick
and Kylie Thompson. Welcome to Catch Up.
Former National Security Advisor John Bolton's new book is set to be released next week, but is already causing an uproar around the White House and the nation's capital. In the book, titled The Room Where It Happens, Bolton makes several serious claims about President Trump and his administration, which he was a part of from April 2018 to September 2019.
Among some of the claims in the book, Bolton said Trump asked Chinese President Xi Jinping to help his 2020 reelection campaign, while also alleging Trump told Jinping he should continue building concentration camps, saying Trump called it the right thing to do. These claims echo similar sentiments surrounding the administration's connections with Russia and Ukraine, and was the central point behind the president's impeachment trial earlier this year.
The impeachment trial itself is also a topic covered by Bolton's book, in which he described the Democrats' handling of as, quote, impeachment malpractice. Bolton accuses House Democrats of conducting a hurried and partisan investigation and criticized their plan to only focus on the administration's involvement in Ukraine. House Democrats had planned for Bolton to testify, but he refused and was only willing to testify to the Republican-controlled Senate, which voted to reject hearing any witnesses.
Moving on to our second news story of the day. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled out President Trump's plan to shut down DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. The continuation of DACA ensures that approximately 800,000 children of immigrants, known as Dreamers, will not face deportation and can continue to be able to dream and do big things while living in the United States.
The decision is a big legal defeat for President Donald Trump on the issue of immigration, which has been a major focus of his domestic agenda, according to NBC News. The decision, authored mostly by Chief Justice John Roberts, said the government failed to give an adequate justification for ending the federal program.
The administration could try once more to get rid of the program by offering a more detailed explanation, but the White House might not want to end such a popular program as we get closer and closer to a presidential election.
To chat with us more on the topic, we're bringing in official Catch-Up News correspondent Bryce Burge. Bryce, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So to kind of follow up on that last sentiment there, with it being an election year and with so much more being on the plate of just the current administration and federal government as a whole, do you feel that this is something that we wouldn't see a potential new challenge on again until after the November election?
At this point, based on why Chief Justice John Roberts flipped and actually went with the liberal minority on the court, we might not actually see this brought back up ever again. This was brought up specifically because this was an Obama measure, and this was part of the ongoing fight between separating Donald Trump's legacy from the people that did not like the previous administration, and a measure that honestly was meant to really kind of rally the base for Donald Trump. At the time when Trump said that he was going to end the measure in 2017, anywhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of his supporters actually disagreed with him. But when they brought this case forward, they brought it forward based on the fact that Obama could not actually bring that forward based on his powers enumerated in the Constitution under the executive branch. That is the reason why Roberts flipped and went with the liberal minority on the Supreme Court, and why he authored the opinion is that they weren't talking about the merits or demerits of DACA or the previous DREAM Act or anything else like that. They were talking about how poor the argument was that the Trump administration brought forward to even bring this case to the Supreme Court. Again, it was a 5-4 decision. It was the same 3 conservative justices that voted no that were the same 3 justices that voted against the LGBTQ protections earlier this week. The one flip was Neil Gorsuch. When Clarence Thomas wrote that dissenting opinion, he actually talked about whether the merits of it were true or not. But unfortunately, that's just not how the case has been brought forward. And to try to bring this forward again would have to completely redo all of the work that has been brought forward so far by the Trump administration, because the crux of their argument was actually about whether or not previous President Barack Obama could do what he did in the actual DACA proceedings and procedures.
Bryce, you kind of touched on it there a little bit, but this is the second major Supreme Court ruling just this week where Republican-leaning justices have flipped and voted alongside the Democrats on what, for Republicans in an election year, are pretty big major political issues. Is there really anything to read into this besides simply how the justices voted? Is there anything that people can look at beyond that, or is this simply just the way that justices viewed these certain issues and how they were brought up?
Well, I think there's 2 aspects. One is that we as an American society put a lot of emphasis on partisanship, and when you think about it, there's usually that kind of Republican Democrat, and what party of the president that appointed these people were, that kind of makes them think that they lean one way or the other. But looking at Roberts and Gorsuch, those 2 in particular have shown to be more centralized than what people really kind of thought. You see it from a Stephen Breyer on the other side of the issue too. So you have some of the ones that are farther away down the partisan line, I guess, or the liberal conservative slant, either or. And then you see some weird situations where you'll see a liberal justice like Ruth Bader Ginsburg go out, and she has a historical record of really not enjoying international legal issues and being one of the most conservative justices in American history in terms of international action. So it really shows to me that people are looking at this in the merits of the actions and the arguments, which is what the Supreme Court's supposed to do. People kind of forget that you're only supposed to go by the merits of the arguments presented in a case by the attorneys and not on the overarching thing or issue at hand, which comes into play a lot that we see by like a Justice Samuel Alito. So whether or not this is a conservative thing or a Democratic thing, I think that there's been a streak here of liberal items that have been approved, but when Brett Kavanaugh came out on the Supreme Court, there was a streak of conservative wins too. I think it's just the trends that the Supreme Court has as the caseload comes up.
All right. Thank you so much, Bryce, for joining us today. Now let's bring it back over to Dan to talk all things sports.
English football returned yesterday as the Premier League resumed their season with 2 matches between Aston Villa and Sheffield United, as well as defending 2-time champion Manchester City and Arsenal. The Top Flight League had paused their season with 9 weeks left, and yesterday's game marks 100 days since the league has played any matches. The games were played under strict new rules that we've seen in other leagues around the world that have restarted play, like disinfecting balls and bench players socially distanced. And even with only 2 fixtures, there was plenty to discuss from the results.
Teams in both games wore jerseys that sported patches that supported both the Black Lives Matter movement as well as the National Health Services, the UK's publicly funded healthcare system and the frontline healthcare works in the country, while the names of all players were replaced with Black Lives Matter. Both games also started with a moment of silence in support of frontline healthcare workers, and all players, coaches, and staff started the game by taking a knee in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. The changes to the jerseys reflect what all teams in the Premier League will wear in the rest of the matches this week.
The matches themselves were not without noteworthy moments. The first match between Aston Villa and Sheffield ended in a 0-0 tie after what looked to be a first-half goal for Sheffield wasn't called as the goal decision technology failed to provide a decision. In the second match, the first goal scored in the league's return was by Manchester City's Raheem Sterling, who's consistently spoken out on racism in the game and country, and has been a vocal supporter of Black Lives Matter. Sterling's goal was part of a 3-0 win for the defending champions.
In today's good news, a nurse who has been on the front lines of the COVID pandemic uses the unique circumstances to finally meet the firefighter who saved her life 37 years ago. Deidre Taylor, a nurse in Alexandria, Virginia, grew up in Manhattan when the apartment building her family lived in caught on fire. New York firefighter Eugene Pugliese was one of the first on the scene and rescued the 4-year-old Taylor and her mother.
The two never had met since that day until Taylor made her way back to New York to help in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. After a shift, Taylor told a local firefighter about her story, who was able to help track down Pugliese, who's now 75 and has been retired for 24 years. Last week, they were able to talk on the phone for the first time since that day and have since talked twice. The two have plans to meet in person once it's safe to do so again, which they hope will be a Yankees game as they're both diehard fans. Thanks for catching up on today's news with us. I'm Dan Kotnick.
And I'm Kylie Thompson. Please be sure to catch up with us again on Monday.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
We appreciate you listening to Catch Up. For even more content, follow Catch Up Digital on social media. Just search @TimeForCatchUp.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we've covered today. Just use the hashtag #PassTheCatchup on social media.
Catch Up is an official production of Public House Media.